to Mo.
Hello. The operations manager for the suggested I may look into trying to connect with this group, and I thought that it would be a great idea to try to join in, and I'm going to pass on to Ken.
Ken Bowen, the real estate specialist for the town and staff to this committee, so I'll turn it over to Michael Sweeney.
Hey guys, Michael Sweeney. I'm a general contractor builder here on Ireland. Here to help any way I can. I'll pass it on to Howard.
I'm Howard Dickler. I'm just here as a member of the public. I'm retired. I served on the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee.
Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy Ferrantella. I'm on the select board and I work at Island Energy Services. I was on the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee and now on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
And then we have, it looks like a Jim Riley who's attending. Jim, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Do you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, I'm Jim Riley. I was a real estate developer here on Nantucket, and I'm just trying to see what we're doing for affordable housing now.
Okay, thank you. Brian, maybe I might ask if you wanted to just like quickly or however long take to talk about the proposals that were received and that can be considered, and I think were sent out to the group just a little bit before this meeting. So I'm not sure anyone's really had a chance to go through them yet.
Sure. So there's actually one that I'm still trying to figure out how to get to everybody because the file is so large, we can't send it via email. So I may have to just make paper copies for everybody to pick up tomorrow or Friday because I can't send it through our mail server. So there are four, I think it was four, there's four proposals that were received that were determined that they met the criteria, and we have determined that they've all met the minimum criteria. There were two proposals. One proposal was received and has been rejected due to being non-responsive due to the fact that it was in an unsealed clear plastic file folder, which is not the way these have to be received under procurement law. They have to be in a clearly, plainly marked sealed envelope. And so that one has to be rejected due for being non-responsive for that reason. There was a second proposal that was received that has been determined to be non-responsive because it was received on Friday, October 23rd at 11:15, which is after the October 22nd, 10 o'clock deadline, and procurement law does not allow us to consider any proposals not received by the deadline. So that proposal also will be and has been rejected for being non-responsive due to untimeliness. So we have four proposals that we have originally gone through to ensure that all of the minimum criteria that Tucker had developed has been met to the chief procurement officer and the assistant procurement officer's satisfaction. We've determined that they all have, so we feel that they all can move forward to the next step of the evaluation, which is all of the committee reviewing the proposals, which again, I'm going to figure out how to get the fourth proposal to everybody. I'll send an email probably tomorrow when I figure out exactly. Most likely what we'll do is just make copies and leave them here, and you can call. I'll give you a way to get a hold of me and you can come and pick it up. So we've sent you the evaluation sheet. What we'll be looking at is the comparative criteria, which is specifically out of the RFP that went out. I'll also send you the RFP just so everybody has it. I don't know if everybody downloaded it or went in. But we'll be evaluating these on proximity to existing SHI properties. There's criteria. The way that an RFP is set up, there's highly advantageous, and not advantageous. And with the help of Ken and Tucker, there were evaluation criteria for those three components that were created and included so that every respondent knew how these proposals would be scored and reviewed. So they all probably have a pretty good idea, most likely, how their proposal fits in, but it's up to the committee to determine ultimately what rating to give each proposal. So one thing I want to mention to anybody who hasn't actually had the opportunity to work on a RFP with any of us in the town, through every one of these comparative criteria, once you have reviewed the proposals for proximity to, as an example, proximity to existing SHI properties, if you score a property as highly advantageous, a respondent is highly advantageous in this category, there is on line 23 a requirement that we have to write a comment surrounding the reasoning and rationale for that particular rating for each proposal. And it's critical that we do that, because that is also it's a requirement of anyone who's rating it, that they give a rationale or reasoning for the rating that they assigned. We'll move through, I can't remember how many criteria there are, Tucker. I think there's 7 or 8 of them, 9, 10, 11. Oh, there's a lot of them. They're all in the Excel rating sheet that you will do. We just go 1 through 2, 3, 4, just reading those and reviewing those against the proposals that each respondent has submitted. Most of the respondents have submitted them in order, so that it should be relatively easy to review these proposals and not significantly or very difficult to find it. I think the next step is that we would meet as a group, because ultimately there's a group ranking for each proposal and an ultimate ranking for a recommendation on how to proceed. The recommendation goes to the Chief Procurement Officer, which I actually will delegate to the Assistant Procurement Officer since I'm on the committee. And then that recommendation recommendation from this committee will go to the Assistant Procurement Officer, and the Assistant Procurement Officer will write a memo to the Affordable Housing Trust based on the recommendations of this committee on how the RFP turned out and what the recommendation is on whether we proceed or whether they think about proceeding or whether they not proceed, and for whatever reason. It should be I don't think it will take much time. It doesn't seem, in looking at them, like I said, most of the proposals have lined up pretty closely with the numerical comparative criteria and the way that they developed them. So I don't think this should take an awful lot of time, but I certainly, we want to review them as carefully and critically as possible to make the best recommendations possible. After everybody's done, we'd schedule a meeting which will be public to review and discuss all of our rationale and recommendations amongst the committee. Because this is a real estate, it's potentially acquisition of real estate. It actually falls under Chapter 30B, Section 16, which requires all evaluations to be public. So again, any members of the public would be able to watch and listen as we discuss the proposals. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Brian, we can certainly approve all 4, RFPs or any number down to 0, right? There's no
requirement to make there's no requirement for this committee to recommend that we buy all 4, or we attempt to buy all 4, or 3, or 2, or 1, or none. Ultimately, that recommendation will be based collaboratively on what's ultimately the group's recommendations for them. So there was not a requirement that we would actually purchase. There's no requirement that the Affordable Housing Trust actually consummate a purchase of any of the properties that responded. I mean, it's conceivable that the trust, Joe, could look at our recommendation and say, they just don't work for us, so we're not going to move forward with them. I mean, that's ultimately really
and the way you set up the spreadsheet, basically each column is a response, an RFP.
Yes.
And we go down and judge versus the criteria, whether it's highly advantageous, or not advantageous, put a check mark, write a comment, that we can then review as a committee. Is there a criteria that everything has to be highly advantageous, or
no.
Does it come to a numerical score, like a 3, 2, 1, or?
No, they don't come to numerical, excuse me. Once we have them all done, we'll put them in a filter so that we can at the bottom of the ultimate one sheet, we can figure out how many has the most highly advantageous, and I think this might actually say if you get a unacceptable, then you may actually be rejected. I can't remember. Typically, that's the way we do it. But we would just highlight how many of each particular category the respondents have. But again, the whole point of an RFP is to base it on an evaluation criteria, which doesn't require that you, in this case, we wouldn't be obligated to buy the one that was offering us the one. I mean, typically it's the highest price, but it's just designed to really let us see comparatively how they are and make a decision. You're not obligated to buy the one that offers you the best price. You could buy the one that offers you the highest price if you wanted under this. There's no obligation to do that. So, but we don't typically use numerical scores because it's been recommended by the IG's office that you not do it that way.
Is there a leeway under this program for proposals to, do they have to meet current zoning requirements, or is there any leeway for flexibility there?
Tucker, I can't remember that in I'd have to look through the RFP. That's a good question. Or Andrew might be able to help answer that one.
The way that it was structured is that it is, we're looking for proposals that conform with local zoning. Whether it's a disqualifying aspect, I can't say right offhand.
So one of the criteria is the potential number of units under existing zoning. So it goes through not advantageous being less than 3, advantageous being 3 to 5, and then highly advantageous more than 5. So this, the way the criteria was set up, I would suggest to you that it would be reviewed within the lens of whether it fits into the current zoning or not. And I don't believe, based on the way that is written, that we could evaluate a proposal on whether that could change based on a change in zoning.
Tucker, when do you want these back? What's the turnaround?
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian, for running through that. So I think, Brian has outlined things well. I think the criteria and the highly advantageous, not advantageous scoring is relatively straightforward when you read each of the descriptions. One of the things I wanted to talk about with the group today is you will see that one of the 3 criteria is the condition of existing units. So that is something where I had anticipated that there may be a subset of this committee, or perhaps the committee as a whole, if every member is interested. But let's just say there would at least be a subset of the committee who would be able to go and actually view each of these existing situations and provide some sort of write-up for the benefit of the rest of the committee as to their let's say professional assessment of the condition of the units, and maybe perhaps what would be required in order to, in general terms, to bring them up to snuff, so to speak. So that was, it feels like that's something that would need to get done and distributed before the rest of the committee could complete their overall filling out of the form. And so I was hoping today that we might have at least a couple of our members be willing to be part of that. And then obviously we would need to arrange with the owners, getting in to see them and so forth. So there's a little time required for that element. But then following the receipt of the report, because we have a fairly limited number of proposals we can consider, hopefully we could get folks scoring within, say, a week of receiving that initial report, if that made sense to Brian and the rest of the group.
Well, I mean, I think that truthfully, Tucker, people could be reviewing them and individually familiarizing themselves with them now in anticipation of doing that, so that once that was done, we could we could then get together and meet and probably finalize this in a meeting. I would suggest that I don't know that we all have to go to any of the subject properties. It might be easier potentially if, you know, you and Ken went and wrote up a report on the observations versus trying to get, because I think that might be the best way to do it, unless, you know, everybody wants to go, but I don't know that it would be necessary if you and Ken and wrote something up on your observations. That might be enough to give to the committee.
Well, so what I was, if it's within the rules, so to speak, and if they were willing, I somewhat was hoping that Michael Sweeney and Mo Moore might be willing to serve in this subcommittee, if you will, fashion, just as I think they have professional expertise that would be very useful for this part of the evaluation.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
And I don't necessarily think it would be unallowable. I mean, the thing is going to be coordinating with all the respondents that you may want to do that with.
Yep.
And whether or not, because as I look at this, we didn't put in a requirement that they allow us access to the property to look at it themselves. So it's, you know, I think that might be at the discretion of the homeowner. And I think in all the responses, they probably indicated what they believed. Obviously, everybody's, you know, opinion is, I think, subjective as to what the property condition is. So they probably think it's in better condition than it is. But you would have to.
Yeah, I'm willing also.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, well, so
I don't think it would be a problem specifically.
well, terrific. Well, that's definitely helpful. So we'll reach out, because in effect, it's sort of our we have 4 proposals, but 3 are actually from the same party and 1 is from another party. So they're in a sense 2 different parties that we need to coordinate with. So I think it would be, I'm hoping it'll be a relatively straightforward exercise. If it ends up being something that would take a tremendous amount of time, maybe we'll have to reevaluate. But we will reach out and coordinate with Michael and Mo.
Okay.
But great thought there, Brian, in terms of folks can still go ahead with the rest of their review and determination with respect to the other criteria, and then this report will just help inform them on at that 1 or 2. There was a related criteria, but 1 or 2 criteria when it's available.
Okay.
So would it make sense then if we went ahead and planned our next meeting, where the idea would be folks would have submitted their responses in advance, we would have sort of the tallies, and there could be the discussion and presumably recommendation coming out of that, perhaps to schedule that for roughly, and I'm just looking, so, you know, three weeks from now would be the Thanksgiving week. I don't know if earlier in that week might be good timing for everyone, or if there are challenges because of the holiday.
No, I'm gone most of that week, so.
Okay. So perhaps should we think about the following week?
Sure. I mean, I was actually thinking, is there a way to do it the week before that? I mean, do you think 2 weeks is enough time?
Well, maybe.
How about the Friday the week before?
Do we tentatively want to think about Friday, November 20th as our next meeting?
Works for me.
That works for me.
Mo?
Yes, definitely.
Andrew?
It works for me.
Andrew, does that work for you?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we will go ahead and try to schedule something. We'll circulate a time and so forth, but we'll plan that it's November 20th, and we will we'll get right on coordinating with the proposers to gain access.
Okay.
Okay.
And I will
Later-
send an email out to everybody once I figure out, hopefully by the end of the day today, how I'm going to get the other proposal to everybody.
Great.
For what
Okay.
it's worth, Tucker, later in the day on the 20th works better for me, but
So would 3:30, this time work well for everyone generally?
works for me.
Yeah.
Fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll
Yes.
try to plan this at that time.
All right.
Great. Well, Brian, is there anything else we need to relay to folks?
I mean, if anybody has any questions, everybody has my email and my office phone number, so you can all certainly call me in between.
Terrific.
Okay.
Any comments from any of the public who are attending or questions?
This is Howard. I don't have any. Actually, I do have one. Can members of the public get the written materials?
They'll be posted on the website probably before the end of tomorrow.
Thank you, Brian.
And Jim, any question from you before we go?
No, sir. No, sir. I appreciate it, though.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you very much, Brian. And we will be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Tucker. Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
everybody.
Nice to meet everyone.